Welcome to the Why We Believe show, where members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints share their inspiring stories of faith and conversion to the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm your host, Nathan Gwilliam. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Why We Believe show. Today I'm joined by Donald Kelly. Donald is from West Palm Beach, Florida. He is a sales and podcasting expert. Donald has founded a company called The Sales Evangelist, where he helps salespeople with courses and coaching and workshops and seminars. He also hosts the Sales Evangelist podcast and has been a keynote speaker at numerous different events. For example, last year when I was at the largest podcasting event of the year, Donald was one of the keynote speakers at that event. Donald has won numerous awards. He's LinkedIn top voice in sales. 3 times he's earned the Salesforce Top Influencer Award. He's a LinkedIn sales influencer. He's done a lot of service over the years, very service-minded individual. He's the former student body president at BYU, Idaho, in Rexburg, where I live. He's also served as a bishop and currently serves as a stake president. And I look forward to exploring how those service roles have impacted his faith and testimony. A great friend and someone I'm very excited to do this interview with today. Thank you for joining us, Donald.
Hey, Nathan, thanks for having me. I appreciate it and look forward to sharing my experiences today and hopefully can help someone.
So, Donald, can you start off, maybe in chronological order, by sharing with us about your life before you were introduced to the gospel, and then how did you find the gospel in your life?
Yeah, so I was born in Jamaica and grew up there for most of my life. I grew up with a Christian background. My mom and my aunt was a matriarch and huge influence in our family. She was a great example for my mom, and that was an early part of my experience going to church as a kid. And one of the things that came with that was Jamaica it's still classified as a third world country. And one of the best ways to be able to get ahead is by moving. It has great education, but the economics are not quite there as it should be it's not a first world country. So most people will leave Jamaica and come to like the US or UK or Canada to seek opportunities with the education they receive. So one point, my mom decided to move to the United States to get an opportunity for us, and then so we can move here. So when I was about 6, she came over to the States, came with her just to visit, but it made sense for me to stay back home in Jamaica at the time until she was established. And I stayed in Jamaica till about 9, and then shortly after that, my brother and I came to the United States. So I lived with my aunt in Jamaica for 3 years until my mom got established and we became residents and so forth. And now while I was here, I went to my elementary school and middle school. I started going to middle school. And in middle school, when I was around that 14 mark age, I met this guy. His name is Ralston Campbell. Later on, his nickname or short name is Dane. But Ralston and I were in a National Junior Honor Society meeting, and we would talk about sports and about specifically camping. And it was a lot of controversy going on with scouting and that point, but camping was still something interesting. People, young people at that age, you're interested in. And my younger brother was going to a school where he joined, they had a Cub Scout program, and they were going to do campouts and things of that nature. And my mom was getting him signed up, and I was like, man, I missed out. I can't do that with him, and I have no opportunities. And Dane came along, and he told me about there's church youth activities and camping and so forth. And at this point, I had stopped going to church. When I came to the United States, my cousin went to a Baptist church, and this church we would go for maybe the big holidays like Easter for sure and Christmas time. And, you get this urge to, draw closer to Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ. And that would happen, and then it would wane, and my cousin would stop going to church. And then every once in a while, they'll send us up there to church, get to church by ourselves, my brother and I. And we would go, and in the summertime, they had summer programs which you could participate in. So, but I'd stopped going to church. And then one of my friends in our neighborhood, he was like a bigger brother to me at this point. I was probably in about 5th grade. in the 6th grade, and his name is Chris. And Chris was on a phone at his girlfriend's house, and back in the in the late 90s, telephone wires would cross. So the telephone wire crossed and with the neighbor's phone, and it was like this person they're having like a church service on their phone, like talking about God and a Bible study. And Chris got involved, and the phone wire crossed, and he got saved on the phone. So he changed and committed his life to God at that point. So being an older brother, he was probably like he was in high school when I was in elementary. So he ensured that I started going to church with him at that point, and I would go to Pentecostal church services with them. So it was like they went to church on Wednesday nights, on Fridays, and Sundays. So they loved to go to church. And then Chris moved away. When he moved away, I was in middle school. So go back to the Dane story now. And it was probably like around 7th grade, 6th, 7th grade. He had moved away, and I had this time where I wasn't going to church because I wasn't forced to anymore with Chris, where you're going Wednesday nights and Friday nights and Sunday mornings and Sunday evenings. So this liberation came, and I was excited for that. And wasn't doing anything bad. I just didn't go to church. And I knew I needed to get back into a church. And though it may have been a little bit of a push and a guilt, it still got me back into the interest when Dane came around, because at Pentecostal church, they were really pushing this idea. The pastor, he would say, like, the year 2000 is coming and the world's coming to an end. Are you right with God? The second coming is coming. And the hellfire and brimstone, like messages, and you get scared as a kid. When Dane brought up the idea of youth activity and church, I knew I needed to get back into a church at that point. So it just kind of made sense. And I started attending church with them, and the first service I went to was an Easter Sunday service, and that was a general conference Easter, 1999, the way Easter landed that year. It was pretty cool, and I got it driving, and his mom was talking about Book of Mormon, and I'm like, what is this Book of Mormon? And when we got I remember we turned onto the church road, onto Corandis, and they were like, well, we have 2 friends at church that we can help answer that question. I literally remember the conversation. We rolled into the parking lot, and then missionaries were there, and they're moving the TVs and stuff, and missionaries introduced me to the missionaries. And that was my introduction to the church. And so the scouting program, the youth activity, and desire to get right with God before his second coming prompted me to be able to get into the church.
Was there a moment when you first remember feeling this is true?
Yeah, I probably say, in all honesty, I didn't know that it was all true right out the bat. I mean, you're introducing to this idea of the new book, this Book of Mormon. They did teach from the Bible as well, in the Old Testament and New Testament, which historically I grew up with and understood. And I just did not know at that point. But one thing that I felt that it was right. I felt good. And I remember being at Dane's house, like in the summertime and whatnot, and the missionaries come by and give a missionary lesson, and I would study the stuff and then go with them and then go home and read. And I remember learning about like Joseph Smith and, him finding the plates, and also learning about his story, reading about that, him seeing the first vision. And then also, like, as I started studying the scriptures more, studying the Book of Mormon and understanding it and hearing the lessons and the principles, I just felt good. I felt that this was right. And that probably was when it started to come. There was a moment it was a number of years later where, I eventually got baptized, and the experiences that I had was from just deep study in the scripture. And I say deep, like in the Pentecostal faith, which one thing I'm grateful for, is like you were in the Bible. Like they're telling you, you're studying a psalm. That's like the appetizer before you start studying the word. So you're reading a psalm or like a proverb. And then after you do that, then you go and study and read something like New Testament or whatnot. And I committed to start going through the whole Bible, and I would mark up in the Bible. So I would read the Book of Mormon. I would read, start off reading the Psalms. You got to get the appetizer. Then I would read a chapter in the New Testament or Old Testament, and then I would read a chapter in the Book of Mormon. So I had these study sessions that I was in as a 14-year-old kid, right, 15. And this stuff just helped me to be able to get entrenched in the Word of God, and I felt at that point like they coincide, the Bible and the Book of Mormon to me, and that helped. Later on, I remember we had somebody from like one of the mission, maybe it was a senior mission or somebody that was visiting, and they came to speak in our ward, and they spoke about the Book of Mormon and evidence towards the Book of Mormon. And I remember that day when I heard the speaker and then coupled that with the things that I've studied. And that point, it would really felt like this makes sense. This is true. Like this is all lining up. And then that, obviously when that solidified, I knew Joseph Smith was a prophet, but then now this was solidifying that assurance, so to speak. And that came in my high school years, which was obviously vital because at this point I'd got introduced to the church at, my 8th grade. So going into high school, getting that reassurance was critical and pivotal towards making right decisions.
So Donald, tell us about your high school years and maybe some challenges you went through and how your faith continued to develop.
I joined the church at 14. I started going to church when I was 14. And my mom grew up with the Protestant beliefs and, Baptist idea. She didn't have anything against a church as an organization. I remember I went home and told her when I was being taught by the missionaries that I wanted to get baptized. This, again, 14-year-old kid, and I wanted to get baptized. And she said, no, you're not getting baptized. Maybe when you turn 18. And the reason why she had this push wasn't because, again, anything against the church, because as a kid and in Jamaican culture, you're not making that decision until you're an adult. Like that is a commitment that you're making with God. So it's like you're not going to mess that up. It was more of like the sacredness of baptism and importance of it rather than just like a fleeting, just get baptized to get baptized. So she really wanted me to get that. And even though she wasn't going to church at all, she still had that reverence for it, so to speak. So it was like, yeah, you're not making a decision now. So I remember when I turned, so it was a shot down, and I remember going to church and I couldn't pass the sacrament, and all my friends were passing the sacrament. I would sit right behind them, the first 2 rows, and I was in the 3rd row, and they would pass the sacrament and, go up there with them as they're breaking the bread and things of that nature. And I longed for being able to help with the sacrament. So when I turned 15, we had some more missionaries, and we asked my mom, and she's like, no, maybe when you're 16 at this point to do it. So again, that was a better improvement. And so this was in August, started coming to church in April and then I asked right around that time. She said no. So August was like, when you're 16, I think she said was 18, and then she dropped it down to 16. And then, so she said no, and just kept going to church. I figured at this point it's not going to happen. So we're just going to keep it on. And my youth leaders were very engaged. I was going to church every week. So came to the scouting program. So my first calling was a quartermaster. So it was that calling, which was assignment through scouting because I was a non-member, and I felt a part of it. I felt like now I can, be here, and so to speak. And then that December, we had Elder Hendricks. And if he's listened to this, hey, Elder Hendricks. But Elder Hendricks came back and he was like, listen, he was in our area now. He said, what if we did a fast? So as a young man group, our teachers quorum and so forth, we decided to fast. And some of the other members, I've been coming to church for 8 months now at this point, consistently. So it became almost like a ward fast. And a lot of people came into this fast, and we fasted, and my mom's heart would get softened allow me to get baptized. And lo and behold, it was that day. I can't remember the exact day, Nathan, but it was like that day or that week. I went home and I asked her, and she said, yes, you can get baptized. And I was like, what? So December 4th, 1999, got baptized. Baptism came, and now the next thing was like, I remember driving home one day from school, and she was driving, and I was in the passenger seat. I don't think my younger brother was in the back, but my smelly soccer bag was back there. Coming from soccer practice, and I remember telling her we were turning in the apartment complex, going around to our building, which was in the middle section, and I said, going over the speed bump, I'm telling you, I literally remember this. I told mom like, hey, I want to go on a mission, and I want to do that when I turn 19. And then she was like, no, you're not. You're going to school first. Again, a non-member mom, and you have this kid, I'm baptized now. And she was telling her this was what I'm doing. And she came the whole idea to this country for us to get a better way of life. And this is an opportunity. You're not going to not go to college. And she didn't understand that I was going to go, but she just felt like you're doing a college education first, do anything else afterwards. And go back to this push again in Jamaica, education is critical. So that was now the new challenge. And I think it was going to be a face-off, right, between now and that point. I was 16 when I remember I had this conversation with her. So it came to the point where it eventually got to, it was like 19, 18, finished up high school. And what was the plan? And I applied to BYU, Idaho. At the time, it was about 2 years or 3 years after that. It was, before that, it became BYU, Idaho from Rick's college. So they were doing a lot of push and marketing and being on the mission field, so to speak, the outskirts out here in Florida compared to Utah. There was this, I remember getting literature and so forth, and I applied. And some of those, I remember getting pamphlets for like some of these housing that's actually still there now. And I'm like, crazy, but a lot of them are gone. But I remember applying and I got accepted to BYU, Idaho. And I also did my mission papers and got, then I got my, before I did the mission paper, I got accepted to college, to BYU, Idaho. And then I started working on my mission papers, and my mom was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I told her. And then I was torn a little bit because I remember trying to figure out, like, is this what I need to do? Am I going to commit myself to this for the 2 years? Can I do this? And should I just go to school? And I remember one day I was just crying and just like, trying to figure out what to make sense of. And I had great leaders again who helped me. But my mom, this is what gave me the assurance, Nathan. She said, all right, whatever makes you happy makes me happy. And that kind of helped to make that reassurance. And I had put my mission papers in, I got the mission call, and I got the call, and a week before, I had a dream. And in this dream, at this point, I was still a permanent resident to the United States. So mind you, my mission call wouldn't allow me to go to anywhere foreign because I can't be out of the country for more than 6 months as a permanent resident at that point. So I got the mission call, and I remember calling my young man's leader and telling him, and calling my mom, and it was downstairs in the mailbox, and she lived on the 3rd floor. My mom did at the time, and I ran up the stairs, but I paused there so the dream came the week before, and in that dream I kid you not, Nathan, I vividly saw Lake Huron. I saw Lake Michigan. I saw this in the dream. And I remember, like, imagine us being over it, like hovering over it, like flying over, like fly over. And I'm seeing this like map wise. And I'm like, oh my goodness, because I craved seeing snow. I'm a Jamaican kid, grew up in South Florida, never, ever seen snow. So then I got this dream, and I knew that I was going to Canada. I didn't know how, but I knew I was going to Canada. Well, running up the stairs that day, I couldn't wait. I ripped open a mission call on the 3rd landing, and I opened it up, and I saw that map, and it was like Detroit, Michigan mission. And I was like, no way. I was looking at the wrong side of the pond at the time, but literally it was that mission. And it was that's what I saw. And you cannot tell me that wasn't real. And that was pure, like, personal revelation. And that was the right thing. And anyways, I went to Detroit on a mission. So leading up to it, that's what led up to it. My mom was really excited and happy, and still supported me. And I worked beforehand, saved some money before going. And she told all of her friends about when I get my mission right home. And I even went to Rosa Parks' funeral, which was in Detroit, during my missionary service in our area, and got a program from that. And she would take those pictures and share it with her friends, and was really proud of me and what I was doing. And Junior Pasta out there teaching us, she was saying Jamaican.
Yeah, we have a picture of Rosa Parks right up in the hallway right outside my office with one of her quotes.
Awesome.
So that's really cool. You were able to be part of that. Tell me about why you decided you wanted to serve a mission.
So there's a couple pieces, and this helps me now as a leader. as I'm working with bishops and working with young men and working with converts and people who are coming into church, like for me, I felt that it was a duty at that point, and and also the example in a good peer pressure way from those who went ahead of me, like Frank Montero, who I didn't know, but when we would, meet as a quorum and they would read Frank's letters, and I was like, oh, this is cool. It sounds interesting. He was in California. And then Pablo Quiroz, who I did know, and he was an example for all of us. He was one of the older young men, and he went on a mission, and we'd get his letters and so forth. It was like, this is what you do. This is the next step. And the leaders also set an example for us and educated us on what a mission is going to be and why you want to serve a mission. And this idea of sharing the truth that I now know, the experience that I've had with other people, was intriguing to me. And also this idea of, go somewhere exotic, like Detroit. But going somewhere to go and do this was also intriguing. But for the most part, it was this idea of I get a chance to share the word of God with other people, just like how missionaries brought it to me. I can go and be that emissary, like, to other people somewhere. And for those reasons, it really weighed on me and gave me this desire to go and do it.
So this service in Detroit, Michigan, that you did for 2 years, how did that impact your faith and your testimony? And are there any specific stories that you'd like to share?
Yeah, my experience in Detroit impacted my faith tremendously. So not only with the inspiration prior to going, this personal revelation that made me aware that God is, mindful of this, little kid in South Florida and willing to give him a personal revelation prior to a mission call. It made me realize that God is there, that this is true, like that you can't make this stuff up, right? Why did the dream come from that location? Like so that part there was like, you could not give me more of a booster going into this thing, that this was the right thing to do. And then the other side of that was, as a missionary, I learned how the church function. So as a convert coming into church, learning more about the general conference talks, even more so, and deeper understanding about better understanding of fundamental doctrine principle, learning about church history, learning about, principles and that the plan of salvation in depth. Learning all these things helped me faith-wise to go through challenging circumstances. And one of the principles I learned from my mission was that to every problem, there's a solution. No matter what the problem is, there's a solution. And I test back to the challenges I face right now towards those experiences as a missionary. So let me give you a couple examples. I remember one day we were, as a missionary, working with family. And this guy, he was convicted of manslaughter, and he found a church in prison. And when I came out in the mission field, he was like 3 weeks out of prison, and in prison he discovered the Book of Mormon, and he came out and found the church and found the missionaries and started reaching out to them. But he couldn't get baptized for 2 years because he was on parole. And there's challenging times where you just kind of feel like, is Jermaine ever going to get baptized? Is this going to work? How is this all going to take place? And I remember when, towards my end of my mission, I wasn't able to go to his baptism, but I got my mission on the 24th of March 2006, and it was like about a week later or so, the stake president was out of town and was needed to be there to finalize and approve some stuff and for the baptism. But anyways, he was baptized, and I was like, man, look at that. There was a problem, and then look how the Lord worked, and there was a solution. In the mission, examples like this happen on a smaller scale often. I remember at one point I had like 4 or 5 bikes in my apartment. And the reason was my bike broke down and I didn't have anything. But all of a sudden we found a solution to it. Or you had a flat tire, and then somehow a solution worked out. Or a friend you're teaching didn't, something was hindering their baptism, like Tim and Val. We're trying to help them to get baptized and to progress forward. And you're just thinking they're married living together in common law marriage forever, but didn't make this decision to get baptized yet. And now it was like, oh, this is impossible. It's not going to happen. They're not budging to make this move. But there was a solution. Solution could have been like fasting again, or praying, or educating them, or bringing a member over. But every problem that we had, the Lord was able to help us, guide us to a relevant solution, and that tremendously helped my faith. And also helps me now when as I'm out in the business world or in professional world or whatnot. And I remember once when I was in college, going back to these experiences, I was we were taught at BYU, Idaho, that this is a discipleship preparation center. You're going to learn secularly just as much as you're going to learn spiritually. And I remember I was taking an Excel class, and I didn't know how to do the stuff. We remember looking at how to run macros, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this thing is so difficult. I don't remember any of how this to be done. And I went home and I flung myself down on the side of the bed trying to do this homework. And it's across from where you are now, Nathan. And I was praying on the floor there in my room in the basement. And I got up and I just felt like this, like I knew what to do. And it was pure revelation. But it taught me again, previously, if I didn't have that mission experience and I didn't have all of those challenges that we were able to overcome through the Lord, it probably would have been a hard sell for me to think that there was a solution to this problem. I would have just said, hey, I just can't do Excel. Let's drop the class. But going through that, it did help me, and it taught me, and the Lord opened up my eyes, and I was able to get that homework done, an assignment, and that's revelation. And that came from my experience as a missionary. Every problem, there's a solution. So trust the Lord, and He'll
I love
guide you.
that. I love how the Lord helps us get through those hard times. What's one of the hardest things that you've had to go through in your life? And how did your faith and your testimony help you get through that?
So go back to the high school days again. In the group of friends that I was, when I came into church, Dane of Ralston, he hung out with a guy named Andrew, and Dane and Jason and Servant Peter and some of these other guys. But there was a core, Dane, Andrew, and myself, we were hanging out. Dane, unfortunately, became less active. So Andrew and I were hanging out. So the guy who brought me to the church, his family. And that's a long story for another day, another episode. On some things you shouldn't do in the church, that could push people out of the church. But Dane, Andrew and I started hanging out. We started going to the same high school. And I became like a brother to me, and like a really good friend. And I would hang out with him. We would go to seminary. Since obviously don't have my family didn't take me to seminary, I had once in a while my mom would take me, but I had a friend, and he would lady in the family in a ward, they would bring their daughter to seminary, the Nielsen's, and they picked me up, and I would go. And then at seminary, I would go to Andrew's house, and then we would go to school together with his siblings and one of our other friends. So we had this system. So then I probably was around my senior year of high school at this point, and the junior year where we started experiencing it. My mom she started dating someone and became like a stepdad, and he was physically abusive to my mom. Never physically abused us, but he physically was abusive to her. And one night he came home, and typical being very drunk. He was drunk and took his problems out of my mom, and I was in the kitchen on the linoleum floor. My brother and I at that point, and we had a little sister from that relationship my mom had, and she was a baby, obviously, in the room, but I'm the oldest, and I scrawny, and you need to support and help your family, your mom, right? So I couldn't sleep, and I was worried about my brother and making sure worried about my mom, and every time he would get in this rage, so I would stay up and not sleep for the most part. And he was arguing in the kitchen with her, and then screaming, and knocked her on the floor and started stumping her head. So we ran into the kitchen at this point, and she was like in a pool of blood. And Nathan, I thought she was dead.
My goodness.
I was so mad.
Horrible thing to have to go through.
Yeah, it's really angry at it. And anyways, so we called the cops and the ambulance, and he got put in jail, and it was bittersweet, obviously. So he got put in jail, which was great. But the bad part of that was now you have a single mom with not much income, and she was depending on your family depended on the income. So she was in a hospital and paycheck to paycheck. So for about 2 weeks, that's dangerous, right? When you don't have that much income coming in. And then it went on for like a month. We missed our rent, and then roll into the next month, and we got on some financial. I remember coming home, being again the oldest, and seeing that fluorescent orange sign on the door, and it was the eviction notice. And so my mom, being calm as much as she could, we were able to contact and find a storage unit, and cousins came by, and we were able to pack up stuff in duffel bags and boxes quickly, and we had to find a storage unit, put stuff in storage. Fortunately, we had relatives in the area, but we didn't have a place for ourselves, and like couch surfing, so to speak. Well, my mom, brother, and sister was able to live with one of my cousins, and then me, because of the high school and education being important, I was going to this art school, and it's a prestigious school in South Florida. And it's a public school, but you audition to go in. And so we needed me to get to that school. So I lived with one of my other cousins. They had a 1-bedroom place, and they had 3 kids at the time. And they had a small living room, and they had a laundry room with like a bunk bed. And the kids didn't really sleep in there. It's like the water heater was in there, and it was just a smaller room and this little space. And that's where I was going to stay. And that was, it was depressing because I couldn't see my family. Like I love going home and being there with your mom, your brother, and your sister. But I literally, that time I found myself getting just like a dark space, like not, just like depressed. And then I stopped going to seminary because the system was messed up. So then it was just rough. So about a week or so, but like good ministers, my friend Andrew at the time, and the local leaders started asking what's going on, and I just didn't have the guts to tell them anything. I was embarrassed by it, that we didn't have a place to live at. We're in this circumstance. And I told Andrew, just like I remember we went to, one day, I got to seminary that day, and after seminary, he's like, dude, what's going on, man? And I just was embarrassed and just bawled. And there was this Trans Am in the front seat, and just like, listen, his sister got out of the car and she went into school, and I just told him, like, listen, man, we have nothing. And he said, we're brothers, man. Of course it'll be fine. And then he's like, I talked to my parents, and his mom and dad said I could live with them. And then we called my mom, and we talked to her that day, and she said, yeah, it was fine. Until she got back on her feet. She took me in, and was bawling. Sorry. Told the story before many times, but I don't know, so they took me in because my mom, brother, and sister were able to stay with my other cousin. They had the room, but they allowed me to live with them during that time. It was about a year or so. So then I was able to, my mom got back on her feet, and then we were able to get back into a place, and was able to do the mission paperwork and stuff at that point. So it was a hard time, but it was like a big blessing, Nathan. Let me tell you why. Because even now, before the mission, I started to see what the gospel was supposed to look like in a home where they got up early, and I didn't understand this. Being a member of the church now for probably a couple of years, but these people would get up before seminary and do family scripture study like at 5 o'clock so that we can leave at 5:30 to get to seminary at 6 o'clock. And then they had family home evenings on Monday nights, and I was the only one, the weirdo in the family, right? Because part of the family now that really enjoyed family home evening, because I never had that. and being able to have dinner around the table and not like going to your own rooms or sitting down in the living room. And just these things, it really showed me what that family structure, that nucleus should be like. And I wanted that. And it was a great help and strength to me. So going back home, being with my mom, working, going on, finishing high school, and then going on a mission, I knew what I needed to do. I knew the path I needed to follow. I knew what I wanted. So yeah, that was the hardest time, but it was a good time too.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, Donald. It's amazing how some of the hardest things we have to go through in our lives bring some of the greatest blessings. And because of what you went through, you were exposed to that family and you saw the vision for what you wanted. How has the gospel blessed your family?
The gospel has blessed us tremendously from not only that experience, but also like my immediate family right now. This gave me a vision, Nathan, of what I wanted to do. I knew that now I could go to college. I knew I was going to go to college no matter what, but I knew that I had a place where I can go, where I can get a vision, a great education, and to increase testimony of Jesus Christ. I knew from that I could go on a mission and get the spiritual strength and fortification. I knew about the sealing of families and families being together forever, and the how to rear a family in righteousness, and all of that. Like the gospel just helped bless us. And so my wife and I were able to meet. She was that when I first came to church, at a 14-year-old kid, right? The first regular Sunday that I came, they were going out visiting some of in the third hour, some less actives, and hanging out, doing some stuff with the missionaries, and was able to go. And that's when I first saw her and started becoming friends over the years. And eventually, by time after my college experience, we were hanging out as YSA and got married. But the gospel helped us to be able to build a marriage on righteousness and strengthen our family, and may provide a blessing for us to have our family right now. So I don't know if I blundered through that, but that's how that's what, that's probably the most important thing that I can say I got from, besides the fact of our Father in heaven again, but sealing and that blessing of being able to have a family.
You've served over the years in leadership callings that have taken you away from that family a lot. We were talking about that earlier. And how have your leadership callings in the church helped to strengthen your faith and your testimony and your conversion?
The callings in the church definitely have strengthened my faith because it helps me to become a better father. And in particular, like serving as a bishop, you still fairly, I don't know, it was unexpected calling, because the bishop at the time was serving for only 2 years. I was elders quorum president, but no clue that this was going to come out. It was a straight out of left field, still pretty young. Time was like 27 or so, somewhere around there, 28. And but we got called to be the bishop, and for our family, one of the things that was important was personal revelation. So that service as a leader in the church was able to help us when it came to many different things. And I'll give you a story. And I think for us, we knew our spiritual level needed to maintain. We needed to live up to our standards, right? So with a young family at that point, we did certain things. We were making sure we were doing all of those things that we knew, the fundamental things like studying every day, couples, personal study, temple attendance, and so forth. And we did some of those things when we were courting. So it was always this habit. But the spiritual level became even more stronger because of that service experience. I don't care what people say, like you're serving as a family that's serving, even though there's one person maybe called to the bishop, set apart, like your whole family is serving. And for us, there were sacrifices that had to happen, and we knew why we were sacrificing, but we also knew the sanctity of our marriage and our family, so we stayed within a bound with that. Like, for instance, we knew Tuesday nights were gone because that's when our mutual activity and church activity, and we knew Sundays were going to be a a challenge. But then Saturdays, Friday nights, Thursday nights, Monday nights, every so often things would come up, but for the most part, those were our family time. And we knew that if we committed together to doing this, that it would help us out. And there was a miracle of the baby wipes and the pandemic towards the end of my service. We had a son born in 2019, and we had tons of diapers because my sister-in-law was brilliant. She made sure we had people do the birthday cakes, diaper cakes that we made. And we had tons of those at our baby shower. But then when it came to the wipes, and we ran out and everything was going crazy in the pandemic now, and diapers for glory for days, but we ran out, we didn't have baby wipes. And then all of a sudden I remember that day everything was shutting down. We went to Walgreens, and I was trying to find some wipes, and there's one wipe left, a pack of wipes. And this lady she was getting it, and I was behind her, and then she was like, yeah, she's like, do you need it? I was like, yeah. And then she was like, okay, I have some more at home. Here you go. She gave me, so I had the baby wipes, like one little pack now. We don't know how long things were going to shut down for. And we're like, what the heck is going on? And then we went home and we were there. And then this sister from the ward had no clue about this stuff. But she gave my wife a call, reached out to her and said, hey, do you need some baby wipes? And she was like, what? And then she's like, yeah, yes, we do. And after the call, she was asking me, did you talk to Sister XYZ about this? I'm like, no. And this is how random this is. This lady worked for this person that had a company that so happened to have they sell wipes, like baby wipes. These they sold on Amazon. So she sent us a box of baby wipes. It was like for 3 months worth of wipes. And we were like, what? And this goes back because we were praying and we were trying to figure out how can we get this. And this came throughout the whole pandemic. And for about a year or so after, we had this setup where we didn't pay for baby wipe, about a year and a half, where you got these every 3 months, got a big box of baby wipes. And it was a miracle of the wipes. And it came back just to this idea of when you serve and you're faithful, the Lord will help you and take care of you. And we saw that time and time again. Were we millionaires in that process? No. But our needs were met. Everything was taken care of. And time again, these little stories, our family, we would look at these and say, oh my goodness, it's like right at the brink or at this moment, there is this major coincidence. And there's no coincidence. It's the hand of the Lord. And we believe and we attribute that towards our service as a family.
Any other experiences from your church service that you'd want to share?
So as far as other experiences that we've had, there are a lot of stories time and time again, that little vignettes, but up until even now, recent as in our stake responsibility in personal revelation again, how the Lord will direct you and guide you. As a stake, we were focusing on what are some of the challenges and difficulties that we have, and where are some of the areas that we need to improve. And as I counsel with our Stake Relief Society president and with my counselors, we were coming upon, and with some of the bishops in our stake, that ministering is a challenge for us. Specifically, if we can do ministering well, it will help us to achieve some of our stake goals, as well as some of the focus that we're trying to do. And then it was announced that have a general authority, member of the Quorum of the 12 coming. Now, in all of our messaging, we didn't put anything in there about when they asked questions about, hey, we have ministering challenges. This was literally after we submitted our stuff, but about 2 weeks before he came, we started discovering this, and we started having conversations, and we started prepping for some of our stake trainings around how can we be effective at ministering. And the message that he spent time on with all of us was specifically ministering interview. I could have fallen out of the chair. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, of all the different topics. But this was a tied back where I feel the Lord is very, very mindful of us, even in the details of our lives. And those experiences, these little things that maybe seem like coincidence to other people, we know were revelation. And when you talk to my leaders and you're talking about what happened, they're like, you can't make this stuff up. And it just that the hand of the Lord. So when it ties back to our personal life and our families being blessed, time and time again, we always just go back to all those experiences. We are taught how to have receive revelation, how to receive inspiration, and especially in our service as bishop, and also now in stake responsibility. And we see this also in our personal life, where when we practice those things and we truly have faith in the Lord, He's able to help us and guide us and make magic happen time and time again.
Okay, Donald, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you for sharing your faith and your testimony and your stories of conversion here. There's one final wrap-up question. Donald, why do you believe?
So the reason why I believe is very simple. I feel that I know that Heavenly Father knows me. I know that He had a hand in my life and guiding me to the path where I'm at today. And I have had too many witnesses to confirm it, whether it's from that time studying the Book of Mormon and hearing that a senior couple speak, or whether it was like the personal revelation as I'm studying, or experiences with my mission call, experiences with service as a bishop and as a stake president, or experiences on my mission, meeting people. And it just solidified that there is a God that's out there, and His Son is Jesus Christ, and that He is heavily in the details of our lives. And those details, time and time again, has added up. And the confirmation that I've had and the witnessing when I've prayed about the Book of Mormon, or about the restoration of the gospel, or about Joseph Smith being a prophet, or about modern revelation, time and time again, I've received revelation. And I feel that I'm knowing better over the years how to receive that revelation. And those things have confirmed with me. And that's why I believe. I have a personal testimony from the Spirit. I have a personal testimony through the Scriptures. I have personal witness from our Father in heaven that these things are true and all are restored. And that keeps me going. And that's why I believe.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing, Donald.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Nathan.